Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Monday Sunday follow up. Only it's on Tuesday because somebody had a migraine yesterday, and so we decided not to do the video, which is a good call, by the way. What we do is Sarah and I sit down and we kind of rehash Sunday's message. And Sarah, who is brilliant, always comes along with some great questions, and we also get to hear some of her feedback in the message, where Sunday we don't get to. So we'd like to hear your voice.
Thank you, honey.
You're welcome.
I usually like to hear yours.
Oh, well, thanks. You have the questions.
Oh.
I'm just
ready?
over here. I can do some stand-up comedy or something.
Why does love matter?
All right, what's the question?
Why does love matter?
Well, I mean, we use it all the time. I mean, every song. And it's because it's something that we are created by God to experience, because God is love. And so deep inside us, we were created to want love, to long for love, to be loved and love others. I like the Toby Mac song, "I was made to love you," to be made to be loved by you. And so if you look at our culture, everybody's longing for it. And sometimes we find pseudo love. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we find true love, and sometimes love breaks our heart. Sometimes, as we said Sunday, love stinks, and we are called to love anyways, which is really why this whole thing is important, is because love isn't easy. Love is very difficult, and if you are at home doing homeschooling right now, as the two of us are with some of our children, love is extremely difficult. There are moments where we are thinking about moving out. So, but why do you think love matters? Like, as we talk about this topic and we talk about this conversation, you and I on a regular basis have conversations about that guy or that gal, and they're hungry for love, but instead of finding and waiting for real love, they settle for other things along the way. Why do you think it matters so much to us to define what real love is? Like, this is what real love is. Like, again, you and I talk about all the people we run into that are like, they settled for something else.
Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, our youth, some of them that come from broken families or really sad situations and have that longing for love and attention and affection. But like you said, God is love, and we all have that God-shaped hole in us, seeking that out, and don't always find healthy things to fill those holes with, because ultimately God is the only perfect love that can satisfy that need. And like you said Sunday, love, we choose to love. It's ultimately, especially in marriage, it's a commitment. It's not a feeling.
Right.
With God, that's the only perfect love we're going to find. But we do long for the closest version of that we can have here on earth.
Yeah, and we teach people to ask this one simple question. We say, if you can ask this and get the answer, you're probably going to live life perfectly, if you will. And what does love require of me in this situation? Well, there's underneath that question is the idea that we understand that we're talking about love from God, and therefore love isn't everything. In the sense, it's not always acceptance. Love is always tough grace. It has boundaries. It has demands. It says, I won't put up with certain behaviors. And so why does love matter? Well, because it has the ability to save a marriage. It has the ability to create a marriage. It has the ability to say, I'm not going to marry this person because I know that God loves me this much, and because of how much God loves me, I'm not willing to settle for something less than this. And again, it has the ability to save friendships. Again, that idea that love hurts sometimes, love stinks, or love's difficult. Sometimes love says, you have every right to be angry and ticked, and absolutely you are justified in everything you feel. Forgive anyways. And so when I'm like, really? Like, let's go back and talk about judgment. But, it says forgive anyways. And you know what? That person took advantage of you. Love them anyways. Care for them anyways. So love is always asking us to behave other than how we would naturally want to behave in our sinful nature. It's inviting us to behave as Jesus behaved. And because of that, then it's always calling us to do something that, again, it's difficult. It's not what I want to do all the time.
Very true. You said through this series that love is only forever in the Christian worldview. When I say I will love you forever, that idea is really only true in the Christian worldview. Can you explain again, because it's so important that we understand what you mean by that?
Yeah, so, and this is something that kind of occurred to me as we were writing the sermon series and walking through the messages, that it's only in the Christian worldview that love can be forever. And so let me help you understand this. In the Eastern religions or Eastern worldview, there is no sense of a deity, a theistic deity who loves. So there is no eternal love, because you and I ultimately are gods, or one day hopefully will become God if we just earn it and we're good enough. In the Islamic worldview, Allah has no desire to love his creation. He wants to rule over, and we are his subjects. And so we work to earn Allah's favor. Again, there's no concept of grace or love in that. And that idea that Allah might love you. I mean, and a Muslim would go, why would Allah love you? Why would he want to do that? You're so far below Allah. And of course, in the atheistic worldview, and again, we're not saying that any of these people who practice any of these worldviews can't love. That's not what we're saying at all. But when you ask them, why do you love? It's interesting, their answers. And so in the atheistic worldview, again, the only reason to love someone is because you might get something in return, to be blunt. It just, unless I'm getting something in return in the atheistic worldview, we're just molecules. So why love at all? Other than, again, we all steal from the Christian worldview to make our worldview work. And so here's how this works. Only if you have a theistic God who is love can love be truly eternal. Now that doesn't sound like a big deal until you stop and say, well, are we going to live forever? Because if we're going to go to heaven and we live forever, how do I know heaven won't one day become hell? How do I know that everything that I've set my heart and soul on isn't going to suddenly become something terrible and we're going to be tortured forever? Well, we know that because God is love. It's in God's nature to love. It's who God is. It's not something he does. It's who he is. Therefore, love is forever. So when we say, I love you forever, what we're really saying is that I am behaving as God behaves towards you. I am caring for you in the way that God cares for you. Again, you can't get that in any other worldview. So it's huge. It's a big, mind-blowing concept, because, again, the only way you get there is to understand that God is not finite. He's not trapped in time and space. He's eternal, so he has the only love that is eternal, which is why it's got to be a theistic worldview. And then you move into, well, which one of these is real? Which one of these is true?
Makes sense. So just because it's only in the Christian worldview that we can say that love is forever, that's not enough to make it true.
Right.
Why should we believe it?
Yeah, just because at the end of the day, and Andy Stanley always says this, he says, everybody should want the Christian worldview to be true. Like everybody should read the story and go, hey, even if you don't believe, you should go, I want this to be true. And then you should want it to be true bad enough that you actually research it and figure out if it is true. And the reason is because ultimately we all want to be able to say, hey, in the end, there is a God of grace who isn't demanding that my merits, my works, my good deeds are going to be the standard by which I'm measured by. And in the end, we want the Jesus who basically says, hey, we're not going to walk around killing people. We're going to walk around loving even our enemy. So the idea that we want this doesn't make it true, though. So we should all want it, but then we got to do the research and the backdrop to say, hey, is it true? Can we trust the narrative accounts of the resurrection? Yes. Can we trust that the Bible is historically reliable and accurate in its copying over the centuries? The answer again is yes. I just recently read someone who objected to the Bible, and the objection was it was written by men. And I went, well, yes, very good. And the person responding said, is your statement written by a human? Should we trust that? Is it just because it was written by people doesn't mean it's untrustworthy? And certainly people can be inspired by God. But again, there's just so many bizarre arguments against, can we trust Scripture? Can we believe in God? That, the Bible was written by men. Oh my gosh, that's right. Well, wait a second. Everything that has been written has been written by men. So again, we seem to trust a lot of that. So just because it was written by men doesn't mean we can't trust it. So I'm sorry, a little tangent there. Silly arguments against God. There are no good ones.
No, there aren't. And I like what you said there about, want to believe it first and then test it, research it, and find it to be true, because ultimately that's where that quest will take you. It's to the realization that it's true. Right.
And if you want some good reading on that, you can go something more simple like Josh McDowell's
More Than a Carpenter.
More Than a Carpenter, thank you. I was mixing two books together there. There's, of course, Lee Strobel's Case for Christ. Then you have some really heavy reading like Frank Turek. He has I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. But there's many good books out there. Ravi Zacharias, of course, is huge. And you can jump on some of their podcasts and listen to them too if you're like me and you actually listen better than you read. So,
good advice.
Let me ask you a question or two here. When we talk about love, what is it you begin to think of?
I don't know. When I think of the word love, I get a warm, fuzzy feeling, and
that's my hand on your leg.
Oh, yeah. And I think of you. I think of my spouse, my other half, and I think of our children and just our family unit. And then I think the love I feel makes me so grateful, and then that comes from God. So I think of it as a very positive thing, and I know that's not everyone's experience, unfortunately. But that's, my schema.
It's interesting because we're kind of bringing this back into a very applicable, like, hey, this is the hands-on stuff. But I had a long conversation earlier today with someone who said, you and Sarah make this remarriage thing look real easy. I laughed at him and I was like, well, I'm glad we make it look real easy, but it's not, man.
No, of course not.
It's been very, very difficult. In fact, you and I both said, like, this was much harder than we thought it was. And we went in like eyes wide open in the sense of, very early on in our marriage, we attended a marriage seminar by, who was it, Family Life?
Weekend to Remember.
Weekend to Remember. And I picked up books on blended families and on how to do a second marriage. And some of those books were like foreshadowing of like disasters you and I would hit. And I would read and go, okay, yeah. And then like 3 months later, we would be in the middle of that, and I'd be scratching my head going, we're brilliant people. Like, we should be able to navigate this better. And we have the roadmap. Like, I have a book here telling me all about it, and we can't do it.
I remember our second Christmas and how hard it was. And you said, the book said that the second holidays are the hardest because the first one you're still kind of wide-eyed, innocent in it. And then the second year, it's like, okay, this is it. The holidays that I remember.
You start to put the two traditions together in the second one. Yeah. And ultimately, by then, you're creating new traditions.
Sure.
And what we found in many places was, here was Sarah's, you were married 16 years. I was married 16 years. And while both of us had been divorced for a while, we still had like our Christmas and Easter and Thanksgiving ideas of how that should work were really from our marriages.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we suddenly put two different traditions together, it did not always work. And let's be honest, I mean, there were many times that we admitted, hey, at this point in time, it would be easier to quit. I mean, in fact, the book said that, like, you've already quit once. Whether or not you chose it or somebody else chose it, you already know that path and it would be easier.
Mm.
And so I thought it was interesting. The reason we stayed together was because it's what God called us to do.
I'll be honest, I never ever considered quitting because I know how destructive it was the first time, and it would be easier early on, obviously, than 16 years and multiple kids in. But I definitely underestimated the work that it would be. And I always say I can't express enough how much I love you and how fulfilling it is to have a partner and a best friend, and it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. But I also have said I don't want us to be an advertisement for remarriage being this great thing, because it is very, very hard, and it's very hard on the kids and our parents and all of the people around us, but it's worth it, and God has restored so much through this marriage and relationship. And
again, one of the things we took away from the family life event was the idea that marriage isn't about making us happy.
mm-hmm.
Our marriage was to be a representation of God's covenant and his commitment to the church, so that others could look and go, all right, what does it look like when God loves his bride? And that's how we should love each other. And of course, back to love, I always like, again, we stole this from Andy Stanley, but the idea that we're on a submission competition, which I'm winning all the time.
Big time.
I hate losing. Right?
So selfless.
So our goal is to outserve each other, and Sarah's tennis game is lacking a little bit.
It's not. Acts of service is not my love language. Can napping be a love language?
Napping is a love language. So when you give me one thing, again, I'm just thinking of the conversation that I had earlier today about love. This person said, hey, so this is someone not married. They've actually not been married at all. They're just kind of young. They're dating, and one of the questions was, "How will I know when I find Mr. Right?" And I said, "Well, you got to look at his last name." Don't think that was the answer she was looking for.
WRIGH, right? How will you know when you find Mr. or Ms. Right? That's an interesting question. I don't think there's one right answer. See what I did there? Come on.
Not the funny one.
Learning from you.
Funny one.
I think it's, unique in every situation. I think there are some people that start out as friends and kind of grow into that romantic relationship. There are others that, you said in the sermon, you don't fall in love, you fall in affection. And for some, it's clear right away that, there's some potential here for love. But I think ultimately what you said about not settling is so important. And because we do hunger and long so much to find that person, especially when the journey takes longer, there is a natural inclination to settle. And ultimately, you will not be fulfilled by doing so. You will not be your best self. You will, not have that fulfillment that you're looking for when you settle. So I guess I would say, I remember a friend of mine from youth group in high school, her youth pastor had said to put the person's name in Corinthians, and, like Aaron is patient, Aaron is kind. And if the person's name in those sentences kind of makes sense and rings true, then that's a good start. But if you're like, not so patient, not so kind, probably not following God's model for what love is.
Do we get like a 6 out of 10 or something on that little scale?
I'd need to review the list again, but I mean, I'd say you're passing.
Oh, good. Well, that was better than most of high school. I said to her, it's important that love is not just an emotional decision. Again, sometimes the idea that I'm infatuated or just, sometimes I say I look at little kids or little kids, like teenagers and young adults, but you're in affection. Mm-hmm. You're not in love.
Or attraction.
Yeah.
Can sometimes be misleading.
And so I think, and this is true in almost every decision in life, it's important to have a pretty good idea of what you're looking for. Mm-hmm. And so what I mean is have an idea of what a right Mr. Right long before you meet Mr. Right, and then you'll know when you meet him. Like if you're like, I'll just settle for any guy, you'll probably settle for any guy. Right. If you'll settle for any gal, you'll settle for any gal. But have a very detailed. And not to the point where you're rigid and like, sure. Hey, this person wasn't 6'3" and 1 inch with, but rather, personality and characteristics and this is what I'm looking for in a man. This is what I'm looking for in a woman. And if someone who loves God isn't that's not the first thing on the list, then you got to rearrange your list.
And I'll say about remarriage, that list was easier to make for me after having been married and divorced, because I knew better what I longed for in a partner, and I knew myself better. And I see it often that people seem to remarry more quickly than they marry initially. And I think we probably faced some raised eyebrows at the speed with which we decided to get married. But you so much sooner the second time, because you do know more. I can't tolerate this in my next marriage. This is a no. What's the word I want? Non-negotiable. Non-negotiable.
That was no help to you.
Yeah. As usual.
Wow.
Just kidding. You're great. So I do think that's something that becomes easier as you mature. And I've heard the opposite for people who were pickier at the start, like, they have to be 6'3" and 1 inch and they have to be this. And as they age, they kind of realize, some of those things aren't as important. They're a little superficial, and I need to look more at the heart of the person and not those surface traits.
All right, great. Let me go one more direction then. So we've kind of hit on remarriage and pre-marriage. Let's talk about marriage for a moment. And again, we can go back to just you and I, because you may say, there are things I just can't stand about my spouse.
Yeah, I could say that. Is that what you want to talk about?
No, we don't have time for that list. So what do I do? What do I do when I can't stand that he or she does? What should I do? You want me to go first? You want to go first?
I can go first, and then you can correct me. Just kidding.
That's what happens.
No, it's not. I'm, a big fan of communication. We talked a little bit about healthy ways to do that last week. But I think, in a loving, oh my gosh, I can't stand it with you, that's not productive.
So that's why I love this lady. Did you see that? The animation that came with that right there was perfect.
So maybe not in the moment of frustration, but outside the moment of frustration, I learned with you not to bring those things up like late at night or, when we're in bed, because that's hard for you.
I heard an interesting fact today on the radio. And a new book that we're going to get, that you and I are going to read. I haven't told you about it yet.
Oh, great.
It's called Love, Grit, or something like that.
I have no idea what you just
90%
said.
Love Grit.
Okay.
I think it's called. I wrote it down.
Okay.
But I was listening to an interview, and they've done long studies. 90% of arguments happen within the first 20 minutes of someone getting home.
Oh.
And
we talked about that last week.
And the author said, hey, therefore, the way to have a healthy marriage, at least one step is
Wait 21
to
minutes.
wait 20 minutes after someone gets home before you engage them in anything that might be
Negative,
challenging
yeah.
or adverse or slightly negative. I mean, it doesn't mean to stay away for 20
Sure.
minutes. You know, give them a hug, give them a kiss. Hey, how was your day? Those things are
And
helpful.
then watch your clock.
Yeah. Like, all right, I got 20 minutes before I
21
can
minutes.
to you. But it's just the idea of I got home, I need to decompress and shift
absolutely.
gears. And
Absolutely.
we've talked about that just in the communication world. I interrupted you, but I
no,
thought
you're fine.
when I heard that, I was like, that's so huge.
Yeah.
And I just thought, wow, there's so many marriages that need to hear just that one fact. Like, just wait 20 minutes before you start bringing up the laundry list of things that need done or haven't been done.
But when you come home and there's stuff all over the kitchen counters, I mean, it's challenging. I'm sorry. I digress. What was I talking about? Communication and doing it at the right time and in the right way. So I think that's important. But you pointed something out, and I think you do this with the kids too, and I think it should just be between us and not with the kids, but that is, there are things that bother you, but rather than nag me to do it, you just do it. And you shared that in a sermon once, that let's say I have this box where we keep our dog leashes, and whenever you would take the dogs for a walk, the lid would be askew a little and leash just hanging out, and it was driving me crazy. And you said something, and I thought, I can just close that lid. I don't have to let this drive me crazy. I can just fix it. And then I'm not crazy. I haven't nagged you. Life is good. And I see you do that a lot. I see you go around and pick up after people and do those kinds of things to keep it from becoming a big deal, which I think is great. But our kids do need to learn to clean up after themselves.
Or we shall shoot them. You heard it here. When
With
the child
Nerf.
is missing.
With Nerf darts.
Right.
So yeah, communication and trying to figure out what you can just let go. What's easier and healthier for you to just say, you know what, this is him. He leaves the toilet seat up. He leaves his socks on the floor, whatever the case may be. I'm just naming things that are common for folks.
That's exactly what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. He leaves crumbs in the bed. Oh, wait, that's me.
Yeah. So I would add to that probably just this one piece, and that is the idea that you've got to constantly be working at it. And the reason I say just this one thing is because I think it encompasses almost everything else, in the sense of, and that's kind of where the title of the book and what caught my eye, that love grit, was the idea of just love's tough. Like, again, I think we often think of love and we think of like little naked cupids floating in the air or shooting little darts at us. But the idea of what love really is, when you sit down with a couple that's like been there, done that, like nursing home edge of life, you know, they've got stories that, I mean, they look at marriage and they're like, yeah, whatever you're going through is no big deal. What? Because they've been there, they've done that, and they gritted through it. Sometimes it's not just surviving through it, but it's learning to grow even in the midst of the tough times. And so I think that's one of the things that, like, again, one of the reasons why I absolutely knew you were the one and knew we were going to make it was because I just know you have that grit. And so even coming out of a relationship where I was told this is forever, and then I was suddenly told, no, I don't love you anymore, which I was trying to figure out how that worked. I knew there was something in you that was going to make it. Like, you're just that tough on the inside. And that's kind of what love's got to bring to the table. It's just, hey, this is tough right now. Hey, this is rough. And this sounds like the talk I give to the kids all the time. Like, yeah, you don't like it right now, but get up, put our pants on, and go at work. You know, we got to go do it anyways, because love is tough. And that's really out of 1 Corinthians. Love forgives all things. It moves, you know, it just
bears all things.
Never quits.
Yeah.
It never quits. So if you're in a struggling marriage, I would say, first of all, go get help. Like, you probably you probably found a way to get into the hole on your own together, but you're going to need help to get out. But then I would say, hey, don't give up. Love doesn't quit. Love doesn't quit. And again, there are lots of resources to help. And
what you said about old couples at the nursing home, I don't know if I've ever met a couple that have been married 40, 50 years that don't have a story that starts with, we almost didn't make it.
We almost didn't make it.
We almost didn't make it. You know, I think that's...
She almost buried me in the backyard.
You didn't have to tell our story. But we almost didn't make it, but we did make it. And anyone can make it. Anyone can make it through anything. Now, I say that, but obviously if there's abuse, addiction, you know, there are some things that boundaries. You shouldn't, right.
And it doesn't mean, hey, we got to end the marriage, but it means we establish healthy boundaries and we get help.
Yes, I never wanted to seem like we're saying you have to stay married even when you're it's not what's good for you. Yeah, get that help. Get an outside perspective to work through those things.
All right.
This was a long one.
I know. You talked a lot. It was a good job.
Oh, thank you. Next sermon?
Yes, we should do it.
Okay. How about if you just do it?
Well, next we're talking about a passion for God. And how we got here was I felt this where you're just like, my passion is gone. Like I believe in God, but I don't feel like I'm in love. I don't feel like I'm excited about it. Right. I'm reading my Bible because I've got a daily Bible planner. Yeah. And so what happens when we lose our passion for God? I mean, there are moments when we have that, moments that like, wow, I'm so in love with God. But it's got to be more than just the hair stood up on the back of my neck during a worship song in church or something that the pastor said. How do we regain and live with that passion every day? So the title of the series is Help, I've Lost My Passion. And our first sermon is talking about the uniqueness of God. So I'm very excited about it. In fact, I just want to give it right now. But we worship a God that's unique. So you said my messages always keep you awake. So.
They do.
Oh, so you want to go to bed, therefore I can't.
Yes. Yeah, let's save that for when I'm alert.
Yeah, all right. All right, anything else you want to say?
I don't think so. Just that I love you and I'll love you forever because of Jesus.
Jeez. All right. Well, guys, thanks for watching. Again, continue to send us your questions about pretty much anything. As you see, we're going to cover it. You can go to www. Did I get it right finally? faithignited.info. Don't forget, we launched our second campus at the Y in Xenia first Sunday in November, so you can check us out there or check us out at Fairborn. We'll be at 2 locations, 1 church, and we're thankful for all your prayers and support as we head that way. On behalf of my beautiful wife, Sarah, and I, God bless you and have a great night.
Good night.